My name is Jeff St Laurent. This is the Live Tuesday Call, and we are back at it again as we're rocking this year and helping coaches transition to a full-time business. Today's topic is all about your email list, and we're going to get into that in just a second. This is something that's, like I said to the people that called in earlier, it's definitely a hot topic. It's definitely a hot topic in the sense that as I work with coaches and I mentor with them, there's a lot of them who have a lot of resistance around, the email list and how much to use it and how to use it appropriately and so forth and so on. So some of the live callers that were called in today, we got a chance to, they asked their questions. So I can incorporate that into the education, part of the benefits of being able to call in live. And of course, we do record all these calls and I post them at the end of every week in my Selling Coaching University on my website. sellingcoaching.com is the website. Head over there to the university. I'll have a lot of fantastic resources there for you. And then I'll also have a really comprehensive resource right on my homepage at sellingcoaching.com called The Ultimate Startup Guide for New Coaches. I kind of bribe you with my dog to kind of get your attention, but then that is an audio and PDF resource guide for you. So definitely go ahead and check that out. That also make you a part of my email community. And speaking of what we're talking about today, is I want you to become a part of that, not just because I want you on my email community, but bigger than that is not only to receive the value from what I offer, but as I'll talk about today, I want you to be able to start to see and how I role model and how I utilize my email for marketing purposes and staying in touch with my audience. So there's a point right there for you definitely to check out right on that homepage, that free resource there. At the top of every page of my website, sellingcoaching.com, I have an invitation to my private Facebook group. We do a lot of great things right there, and I'm also getting in the works of some new and exciting things coming into this new year as well to spice things up a little bit and give you guys more opportunities to speak your message and get out there. So more to come on that. And then lastly, I have one of my group programs that I launched not too long ago where I help coaches convert their leads into paying clients. So I'm really excited about that. We got a good small group going over there. And if you want to find out more about that, check out livesalesconversations.com, just like it's spelled, livesalesconversations.com to learn more. And you can always talk to me if you have questions about that. For right now, we're going to transition into the topic today, and that's all about your email list. And like I said, the email list is probably one of the most, not controversial, but just hot topics in the sense that as coaches, here's what I'll say, as coaches, what I've seen is that we get bombarded with emails. When I say bombarded with emails is that, we sign up for different people's email lists because we're coaches, right? And we want we want education, we want knowledge, we're exploring different ideas, we want to grow our business, we have personal development, right? So the average coach, I can't give you a number of how many emails they get as they subscribe to these lists, but we're on a bunch of email lists, right? And so when we're getting these emails, there's often times that we have a poor experience with these emails, meaning some of the marketers that are doing internet marketing and so forth and so on, coaches, the emails you get are more what I would call autoresponders, meaning it's a preset, pre-programmed, if you will, pre-written email, and there's a whole bunch of series of them. And so when we subscribe to someone's email list, as an example, typically what happens, we get put onto this autoresponder series. And you might have even heard funnels before. I hear coaches like, I want to set up a funnel, and they don't even know what a funnel is most of the time, And all a funnel is I would say it's an autoresponder series. The way I would define it is it's an autoresponder series, but it's a little bit more advanced in the sense that based on specific actions you take or don't take, maybe you click on a link, maybe you buy something, maybe you don't buy something, but based on those things, it will then put you on a different autoresponder series based on those actions, right? So if I'm buying something, then it might put me on another autoresponder series that's specifically designed, if you will, for people that have bought something, because maybe someone who's bought something is more likely to buy something or maybe buy a higher priced product, down the road. Versus if I'm not buying something, maybe with this initial offer, it's going to automatically put me on another autoresponder series that's pre-designed to maybe give you a lower priced offer down the road, something maybe called like a downsell, if you will. So what I'm talking about here is that where we get those experiences, and a lot of those times they're not personal. The perception is and the reality is they're just trying to sell us something. Now, it's one thing if what they're looking to sell us and what they're offering to us is relevant for us and valuable for us. Okay, well then it doesn't matter, right? Because we want that stuff. However, if it's something that really we're not that interested in or interested in at all, that's when it becomes obtrusive and invasive, and we don't want to be a part of that. And typically what will happen is we'll unsubscribe if we don't want to be a part of that email list anymore. And so as we start to think about now we're going into this with our business, and as we start to think about us, having one of these lists, if you will, there can be this misconception or this assumption that I'm going to come across this way. It's the same thing with selling. There's this misconception about selling because at some point we've all had a, quote, if you will, bad or poor experience with a salesperson, right? And if it felt pushy, it felt uncomfortable, and then we automatically just assumed or we just interpret that, okay, anything associated with selling is bad. And now I'm becoming a coach, and I've had these poor experiences with email, these poor experiences with salespeople, and now, oh my God, I'm a salesperson, and oh my gosh, I'm doing these emails, right? And so all of a sudden, we have this association with something negative, and that we don't want to come across this way. And my hopes and what I do, obviously, as I help coaches transition to full time, and obviously the name of my business being Selling Coaching, and I obviously relate everything back to the selling skill set, that understanding the art of selling, because that's what's going to allow you to be able to create a full time business long term, is understanding that skill set, but understanding it from a perspective that's not going to bring you to a position where you're pushy, you're overwhelming other people, and you're not taking into consideration them and what they want. Same thing here with the email, is starting to understand email in a way that we can use it effectively, that nurtures our audience, that communicates with our audience, that makes them want to become a part of our list. And at the end of the day, we have to remember, you might hear me use the word list, and email community, back and forth. They mean the same things. At the end of the day, it's black and white, it's an email list. I like to call it an email community because of the way I like to think about what it is. And I'll start to define it here, is quite simply, your email list, if you will, is your community. It's your fan base. It's your audience. You can pick another word for it, but at the end of the day, this is your business. Your email list is your business because, as I always tell people, the name of our game is building an audience. We've got to build an audience of people that are interested in what we're doing. And when we do that, now we have potential customers because as we're in front of them on a regular basis, they get to know us. We get to help them through our education. Like, for instance, with me, these live Tuesday calls, etc., or the things I do in my private Facebook group, etc., the contributions I write about for my email community each and every week, several times a week, right? Those things start to build and nurture those relationships, right? That's our audience. And so as our audience grows and as we nurture relationships with them, as the timing becomes right for them, they obviously have a need because they're there for a reason. That's why having a clearly defined headline, if you will, of who we help with what specifically is vitally important. People call that a niche. I just call that the headline. But when that will attract the right person. But then as we nurture that relationship over time with our email community, that's when the timing is right. They can buy our product, they can buy our service, they can hire us as a coach, etc. So that's why this is so vitally important. And so where I want you to start to understand is the value of having this and having an email list beyond, especially any social media platform, etc. Like you hear me talk about my private Facebook group. Again, I absolutely love my private Facebook group. There's other clients I work with. They work with LinkedIn. And they have X amount of connections. They work on other social media platforms, and whether they have groups or connections or whatever different platforms we'll call those things, they can create a community on those social networks. The reality is, though, when it comes down to those social networks, and those of you, as I'll use Facebook as an example, Facebook's dynamic, it's changing. You get on one day, and most of the time it's just simple things in terms of how things function. Or sometimes it's behind the scenes in terms of how things are ranked or what you see or what you don't see. Facebook made some changes, I think it was last week or the week before, on what people see in their community, on their timelines, etc. And they're changing how those things work because they want to always constantly improve the experience for the user. But what that means is we don't have any control over those social media platforms. We're just there. And so, if we spend all this time and invest all this time, and we start to build this community, and then all of a sudden, something changes or it goes away, etc. Now, I don't anticipate Facebook, just dropping off the planet and going away, or a Twitter, or a LinkedIn or something like that. Some of the solid bigger ones that have been around forever. But the reality is hey, everything's, the new generations are coming up, and there's new platforms that I see my son even involved in, who's 11 years old, that I'm just like, what is this? But who knows what that platform is going to be in another 20 years when he's in his 30s. We're even saying that, right? But who knows where Facebook's going to be when the primary demographic is, let's say, us, maybe 35 to 50 of the current age, as I'm just guessing that demographic. But when we're in our 70s, Facebook will be what it is. But what's the new Facebook, right? So things are going to be changing. So my whole point here is when it comes to your business, and I say your email list is your business, it is your audience, is when I say you own those emails, it just means that like you have access and the ability to communicate at will with these people in your audience because you have their email. And the great thing about email is email has been around for a very long time. I don't even know how long it's been around for, but the point is that it hasn't changed, right? Email's been there, and you think about, and you ask somebody like, well, how many times a day do you check your email? And even the average person, it's just like they check their email. I'm like, my parents who are in their mid 70s check their email. You know what I mean? And my son, who's 11 years old, has an email with school, and he used to check his email like almost every night for homework. Like that's how they communicate. So it's being bred in from, an older generation, if you will, like let's call my parents. Don't tell them I said that. And then even the younger generation, like my son, it spans from 11 to 70 years right now. So it's something like that's going to be around for a long time. It's a staple, and it's a staple of communication. So I want you to start to understand that. So that's why it's so important, not only to understand that it's something that we own and we control, if you will. Obviously, people have the ability and the right to unsubscribe and leave our email list, and we're not holding them there as a prisoner, if you will. But other than that, is assuming if they choose to be there and stay there, we have the ability to communicate and connect with them whenever we want to, right? So that's why I want really starting to understand the value in doing that and why, and we'll talk about some of that stuff. But we really need to understand that aspect of it. So now that we start to understand, why it's so important to have email and have that ownership and to have that, I want to start to talk about how do we utilize the email list, and this is where I get a lot of resistance as I start to work with some coaches, and as I'll hear coaches talking about their emails, and a lot of the questions, like some of the people that called in today are asking, like, well, how much do we use our email? How frequently do we email these people, etc. And earlier I talked about, the two types of emails, and one would be that autoresponder, the automatic email that's a series through funnels and or just a simple autoresponder series. And then there's the other type of email, which I would just call it a live email or a communication-based email. And as we think about our email list, where I bring my mentoring clients and where I teach, and you'll see me role model if you become a part of my community, is quite simply, I role model those live emails, right? It's the communication emails. It's the emails that you are going to write on a weekly basis. Let's forget about frequency right now, and let's talk more about just writing a live email. And I often hear, as I start to work and I mentor with coaches, they're like, well, I have an email newsletter. I'm going to create an email newsletter. And the email newsletter is, I would say, antiquated at this point, meaning we used to have this like monthly newsletter that would go out, right, from email, and businesses used to do this, and used to have all these different sections, and we use these some of these email providers. Like I always recommend Aweber, and there's Constant Contact, there's MailChimp, and there's dozens and dozens more. And they have all these templates you can use on there. And so they used to use all these templates, and they used to have all these sections, and they used to write an article here and an article there, and it's just like this big long email newsletter that they bolt out like once a month, right? And it's like, that's like old school now. What's current and is communicating with our audience, right? So it's weekly emails, and again, let's forget about frequency right now, but it's a emailing on a weekly basis. We'll talk about how many times a week in a second, but emailing on a weekly basis, but with live emails where you're simply communicating to your audience. You still have to use an Aweber as an example, because those are the platforms that allow you to email to a larger number. You can't just use Gmail or Hotmail or Outlook and email it to bulk quantities. If you put 50 people on email, it's just not going to allow you to send it. I don't know what the cutoff is, right? But at some point, they're going to cut you off. And if you're just essentially using your friends and family initially, most people start off friends and family having 50 to 100 contacts or more. So you're going to have to use an Aweber type service, if you will, to communicate. And it's a good thing because it allows greater deliverability. It allows you on the back end to see who's opening, who's clicking through. And we can use that as for email marketing, some more advanced, if you will, email marketing later down the road. I work with some of my mentoring clients on how to utilize some of that stuff. But for right now, we're going to utilize that service. But in terms of that, what I want you to think about is even though we're utilizing that service, I don't want you to use the template. I want you to use this. Don't want you to use this fancy template, et cetera, with the colors and all this good stuff. I just want it to be like a blank sheet of paper, just like if you went to your Gmail and you were going to compose an email to your friend or to a client of yours, and you're just going to be like, hey, I'm just wondering, hey, how's it going? Just checking in, just wondering, how you're progressing with X, Y, and Z. Hey, I'm wondering if we can get in the schedule for next week, and so we can keep this thing moving forward. Or, hey, Mom, what's up? Just had a game with my son this weekend. We lost the game and wanted to let you know what was going on. Hey, I wanted to send you a couple pictures of blah, 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 right? Like, I'm just communicating with someone. That's the mindset that I want you to have when it comes to your email community and when you communicate with the email list. So however many times you're going to communicate with this email list on a weekly basis, but it's got to be a weekly basis. So at a minimum, it's got to be once a week. I'll give you the why in a second. But the premise with which you're communicating with them is simply going to be, hey, I'm just writing an email like I would to anybody else. Obviously, you want to take an extra moment and proofread it and spell check it and do your best to grammatically check it. It doesn't have to be super grammatically correct, and often sometimes I don't want you to think it's got to be perfectly well written. I work with a lot of people, myself included, that I don't consider myself a writer. Yeah, I've written a book. Yeah, I write emails all the time. I'm constantly writing, but I don't look at myself as a writer. I don't look at myself as like, oh, I can speak grammatically correct all the time or write every word and spell every word correctly. I always have my mom reading my emails afterwards, and she's more than happy to tell me when I do a grammatical error or a spelling error, which, if I don't get anything from her, that means either she's not reading my emails or I'm doing everything right, which is good. But either way, just speak, just write, and whether it's grammatically correct or everything's spelled correctly, don't do it ignorantly. But I want it to be real. I want it to be live, and just start to develop your style with that. I want you to just simply talk to your audience and tell them a story. And I always tell people, I'm like, just start off with a story. If you read my emails, I talk about a story. I talk about what's going on. It might be personal in my life. It might be about something my girlfriend and I. It might be something with my son and I, something that we're doing. It might be just strictly business related. It might be a story at the beach. It might be something like the other day I was doing something with my business, filming a video, and I was just so frustrated. And I'm like, I need to write this damn email, and I get to do this before I get out of the office, and the weekend's coming. And I was just frustrated. And I'm like, you know what? I gotta write my email, and I'm just gonna be real, and I'm gonna be live. And what I mean by that is I wrote it, and I forget the exact title, but it was just like, I was furious, ... still am, and I just wrote about where I was at, and I turned it into a lesson for coaches, because the reality is that's what happens. We get pissed off sometimes, and I wanted that to come out. I wanted people to understand that, and what that does is you, and those of you that are on the email community of mine, you start to see that. And you don't read all my emails that I send out, right? Some people do. They're students of mine. They want to study that stuff. But it's the point is, at the end of the day, I'm communicating with those people. That's where I want you to get to. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be short. It has to be what it is. Some emails might be longer. Some emails might be shorter, right? But I don't want it to have a script. I don't want it to have too much around it, because that puts too much pressure on us. I want you to sit down and just start writing and see where it goes. as an entrepreneur, we've got to learn to become okay with being in the moment and allowing things to go. I often compare it to athletes. I have a health and fitness background, an athlete myself. And as an athlete in those moments, we've just got to be in that moment and see what comes out. You can practice all you want, you can run plays all you want, but until you get out on that court and when it's live and then there's the other team and everything's unpredictable, you're never gonna be able to extract the greatness or the true greatness that you have if you're too scripted and too thought out and too robotic. And that's why I work from a very loose state in that sense. Is I've got my structure, I've got my schedule with things, but within that schedule and what I do, it's loose. So with my emails, it's like, hey, I've got an idea, I've got a basic idea of where I want to go, but in terms of the actual content, I don't know where I'm going when I start my emails. I just start writing, and sometimes I'll write for 10 minutes and I'll just like, this stinks, and I'll just delete everything, or that will bring on another thought, which, that leads me to another thought. And next thing you know, I've got it. And then once I've got it, it's done. I just got to finish writing it out. So that's a little bit on kind of email creation in terms of the mood and the way I want you to present yourself on a weekly basis. So as we talk about that, I want to go into, kind of like how much is too much in terms of frequency. And first off, I want to say you've got to do it. Got to absolutely unequivocally, tell me if you're in a different situation, but bottom line is you've got to, at a minimum, you've got to email your audience at least once a week, bottom line. And I'm gonna give you a quick why, and then I'll go into a little more detail in terms of frequency. And the why goes back to selling. And if you're a student of mine, you understand that when it comes to selling, there's certain things that have to be present in order for someone to buy something from us, product, service, etc., coaching, whatever it is. They've got to have a need for what we're offering. So, as I help coaches transition to a full-time business, it doesn't mean that, they have to want to go to full-time, etc., but there's definitely a need that they're there because they love coaching and they want to do it with some form of a business. They want to earn income from it, right? So that's the need that they must have. And I'm just talking from the premise of my audience. You translate this to yours. Right? So they've got to have that need. And if, like I said earlier, if we have a well-defined headline of who we help with what specifically, when they see our information somewhere online and or face-to-face, however they've come across us, and they've said, and they've raised their hand because they've become a part of our email community, they've become a part of, let's say, our Facebook community or social media platform, etc., they're raising their hand automatically and saying, yeah, I'm a part of this because, yes, I have that need. Now, the second aspect of selling, and this is, if you will, I'd say the most crucial one, is the timing of that need. Meaning we all need and want something in our life. We want to earn more money. We want to get healthier. We want to improve our relationship. We want to fill in the blank. Now, when we actually do something about that, when we actually will create a purchase, whether it's, oh my God, I need a new TV or I need a new car, when we pull the trigger, if you will, on that is when the timing of that need becomes now. Like, oh my God, it's Super Bowl Sunday coming up and my TV just broke and it literally does not turn on. Guess what? The timing is right. We're going to get a new TV. And the thing is, when the timing is right, that's when people go. And some people move faster than others, but that's when we've got to be aware of that. So now let's translate this to your email list, right? If we're acknowledging the fact that we're building an audience and we're nurturing that audience with our email list, right? And they have a need inherently, because why else would they be there? They have a need for what they do, unless they're just a fan of ours, right? Unless they're just like a friend or family member that they like what you do. And even though your topic, if you will, what you do is irrelevant for them, they're there as a fan. But for the person who is there because they have a need that you're helping them with and educating them with every week, the other aspect of that is we got to make sure that when the timing is right for them, that we're in front of them. You with me? So in other words, we can't predict when the timing is right. How can you predict when your car is going to break down and then all of a sudden, we need to get a car this week? Or when the TV is going to break, as an example. I'm using some different examples so you can get a feel for that. Or how can you predict when even something simple, you need milk or you need eggs? It's like you run out and it's just like, okay, I don't want to go to the store right now, but we need it so badly and the timing is right. We need to go right now. And you go and you purchase it, right? And you might even go to a convenience store because it's closer and it's convenient. And yes, you're conveniently paying, two large $2 more for the gallon of milk or whatever than you would if you went to the grocery store. But the value's there because you need it now and the timing is right, right? So same thing with us is when the timing is right and they're ready to buy, now all of a sudden I'm helping coaches transition to a full-time business and they wake up one day and all of a sudden, they got laid off from their job or something happened at work or with whatever. And it's just like, oh my God, or it's the new year. And it's just like, you know what? Am I going to like get off the pot and do this? Or am I just going to like not do this? What's going on? And something happens inside. And all of a sudden, guess what? The timing's right. The reality is they're on other email lists, right? The reality is if they're developing themselves with whatever it is that you're doing and they're in front of you, odds are they're in front of other people are in front of them as well because they're in that position where they're probably needing help or wanting help, but maybe the timing hasn't been right yet. So now the email, right? When that timing triggers for them, you will never know that. But if you're not top of mind, if you're not in front of them when that happens and someone else is, like let's say myself, and I'm in front of them because I'm on top of that stuff, guess what? Next thing you know, they're going to hire another coach. And it doesn't mean that they wouldn't have hired you or they didn't want to work with you more. Maybe you've been very influential with them with all the stuff that you're doing, right? Like, so for me, let's say I'm influential with somebody and they listen to all my calls and they're in my group and they love my emails and they're a big fan of mine, right? And the timing's right. And next thing you know, let's say I'm not emailing for whatever and I'm just slacking off or I'm on vacation or I didn't get around to it, which obviously is not me, but that's where you can be sometimes. I'm too afraid to email them again. And next thing you know, another coach that, they like as well emails them. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're on the phone with them and then they hire them, right? That's what's happened. It's happened to me in the past. This is why I teach this stuff because it's happened to me. And I start to understand, like, how did that happen? And this is someone that I'm like, wow, this is someone that I thought was a fan of mine and someone that I've helped, through email. And I knew was a big part of what I do. And next thing you know, they're hiring someone else. I'm like, how can that be? And sometimes it hurts in that situation. But the reality is like, wow, I wasn't top of mind. And I need to be top of mind. You need to be top of mind. How do we become top of mind? Yes, we can use social media, etc. But email is that platform. Like I said, we've got to utilize that email. So when I say at a minimum once a week, yes, at a minimum once a week, right? If you talk to any serious marketer out there, mentors that I work with, people like that. And I'm not saying I'm not a serious marketer. All I'm saying is that when I've worked with a lot of my mentors, these people are emailing on a daily basis. And I know when I say that, a lot of people are like, oh my God, there's no freaking way. Number one, I don't want to send that many emails to everybody. And number two, oh my God, how am I going to even come up with enough content, to write an email every day? I can't even brush my teeth every day or whatever someone might say, right? So that maybe there's too much consistency with that and content and like there's no way I'd bombard my audience that much. But when it comes to it, at the end of the day, I know on your emails that you are a member or of some email lists where you get emails from them on a daily basis. I don't care if it's Sears or some online like my son and I are really into basketball, so the NBAstore.com, and then there's another one called Fanatics.com, and it's just that I bought some shirts from them and some memorabilia and stuff like that for basketball, and I'm on their email list. I'm on there because I want to know when there's certain sales, and I don't know when my timing is right, but I know at some points during the year, it's my son's birthday, or we're gonna go to a game, or I want to get a shirt or something like that. So I don't know when the timing is right for that, but they have some great sales, and I get emails from them on a daily basis. And 99.9% of the time, I delete those emails. 99.9% of the time. But guess what happened during Christmas time? Guess what happened? When I was getting those emails, and it's, oh my God, Black Friday or, Cyber Monday or whatever the case is, and it's 40% off, there's 65% off. Guess what? I was clicking on those emails. I was moving through because the timing was right and I had a need. And I would buy some things when that happened, right? So you're the same thing. Now, we're not retail. We're not that same type of business, right? So now let's translate it to what we're doing is we're saying, hey, how do we stay in front of our audience? And this is something that you're going to have to answer in terms of frequency. I'm going to give you a guideline, but in terms of frequency, I just want to say this is on my recommendation, what I would say is I would like to see you in front of your email audience about 3 times a week. beginning, middle, and end, if you will. And you can adjust that based on, when maybe you work Saturdays or Sundays, or you still have a full-time job, so your whatever's aren't good. But I want to see yourself in front of your audience a good 3 times a week. I use my Live Tuesday call as a platform to use my emails and structure them around that. And I highly suggest that people structure their emails so that when you're going to email your people. Like, I always email on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. It doesn't mean I don't ever send any more emails than that. I think a couple of weeks ago I sent an email on a Thursday, and I think another one on a Thursday. Because there were just different things going on. I did a little promotion for my coaching, etc. So it's just something that I was doing there. I did an announcement one time, but at a minimum, I have those 3 days, and those are my days where I email, and I have a specific structure. And this is what I help my mentoring clients with. I help them with their specific structure, and then obviously, specifically what we're going to be doing those emails around. But that's what I recommend for you is to have some type of structure like that, so when you're going to do it, and what you're going to do it in terms of. What you talk about, that could be different each time, but there's a point and there's an object to those emails. And again, whatever the topic of conversation is, plan it out, but know that you're going to be consistent with those emails. And for no other reason besides what I said earlier, is you want to be top of mind. And that's the other thing is part of the questions that came up earlier is how do we keep these people engaged? How do we keep them interested, right? And if you're relevant and you're specific to your audience, they're going to be engaged and they're going to be interested. And just remember, engaged and interested doesn't mean, I'm opening all your emails and, I'm reading every email every single time, or even weekly for that matter. Keeping them engaged and interested, in my terms, would be they're not unsubscribing, right? Meaning the information that you're putting out and communicating with them on a weekly basis is relevant for them. And when something's relevant for them, they stay engaged, right? They stay a part of your email list. And you have to remember too, is when I email someone, of course, do I want them to open it? Do I want them to read my email? Of course. I spend some good time crafting these emails and thinking about what I want to say and making it valuable for the person. However, the reality is that I know that the majority of the people, roughly, 85+%, and, open rates can be, very different. I mean, average open rates for businesses are like 4% or less, so, if we're getting in the teens or 20%, especially if you have a smaller list, you can get higher open rates if it's a more engaged crowd. But at the end of the day, is what I like the most about it and realize is important is that they see my name in their inbox. Even if they're swiping and deleting, which happens the majority of the time, the fact that you're there, Jeffrey St Laurent, and you've got your name in front of them, right? And then maybe ideally a catchy subject line or something that might entice them to be like, ooh, what is he writing about, right? Or just like, ooh, some people tell me, they're like, oh, I like to see what. Sometimes you get me curious with your subject lines, or they just get me enough to just open it up, or they just make me smile. I still delete the email, but it just makes me smile, right? They like to see that. So whatever the case is that you're in front of them and you're top of mind. You have to remember, it doesn't mean that they're going to email. How many emails like that do you read on a daily basis, right? It's very few. But if something catches their eye, or all of a sudden there's a subject that you're doing, or I send out a Live Tuesday call, or whatever you're doing on that weekly basis each time, and that subject line is there, or the title is there, what happens is you catch their interest. Next thing you know, especially when the timing is right, all of a sudden now they're clicking on that email, they're reading that email, and then they read that email, and next thing you know, there's a PS, and hey, if the timing's right, or consider one-on-one mentor coaching with me, etc. Next thing you know, they're clicking on that, they're filling out a form, you're having a conversation with them, and you've hired them they've hired you as your coach. So those are the things that we want to start understanding about the frequency of that. And when the difference between that and an autoresponder email is there's going to be a significant difference in terms of how people receive an email that we're crafting live versus a pre-written autoresponder email, right? It's going to be very clear that email is not current, right? So if it's snowing out and we've got a storm, and I'm talking about, oh my God, I'm sitting in my office right now and it's a Friday, and we're supposed to we're having a blizzard this weekend, or let's say it's around the holiday time, or things like that. Like, those are the things that make it make it real and make it live, and how people receive those and the engagement with that is very different than just getting a blasted email where there's just a promotion and or just they're clearly not, they're writing it for you specifically. It's just written there. So when I say you can get away with more frequent emails like that is because as you're communicating with them. I mean, think about people in your world that you communicate with on what, maybe not a daily basis, but a several time a week basis. So out of who in your world do you communicate 2 or 3 times a week with via email, maybe even 7 days a week with, or 5 days a week with? Think about it at work, think about it at, with a spouse, a partner, or with a friend. You might use text now, but you know what I mean? Same type of thing. A text would be personal, an email is personal, and so it's the same type of thing. Is I want you to think about communicating with your audience, and maybe your email only has 2 or 3 lines, and you're going to send them a quick thought, or like, hey, I wanted to just send you a quick thought because I was sitting in my office and blah, blah, blah. So you have to write and think about, these emails have to be these long and engaged emails or these long stories, but just start to determine what that's right for you. But I want you to keep them engaged, keep them interested by these live emails. And you're going to have to accept the simple fact that people are going to unsubscribe, right? People are going to unsubscribe. And quite frankly, if that's something that bothers you, if that's something that, oh my God, I did an email around my brother once, he unsubscribed, and, and I'm like, my brother unsubscribed from my own email list, right? And it turns out he had 2 of his emails on there, so he was getting a duplicate, but it was just kind of funny. And, I wasn't offended or anything like that, but if you get offended when, your mom or your brother or your best friend or maybe even your spouse unsubscribes from your email list, it's like, you just got to get over that and recognize that, maybe they don't want to be on that for whatever reason it is. And so next, you got to keep moving on, you got to keep moving forward. And that's the reality of it. It's going to happen in our business. So it doesn't necessarily mean, oh my God, I'm emailing them too much, or they don't like my emails anymore, or whatever. You got to think about back to yourself and always put yourself in that situation. And when you have unsubscribed from an email list, what was it that made you want to do that? And maybe it was something, it wasn't valued for you anymore. Maybe it was something that they did or said or etc. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to, it's not valuable for you anymore at that point. So those are some of the things that I want you to start to get into and start to understand the value of it and how we utilize it.